Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video. In this video, I'll be talking about my top 10 players of all time for International Survivor as a whole. Now, obviously this will only be seasons that I've watched, which will be every English language season of the show with the exception of Survivor Africa Panama, because that season's not online. So now I have done lists for this already for Australian Survivor and for Survivor South Africa. Now, this list here will be merging those two lists together while also including the other international seasons, which are the 2 seasons of Survivor New Zealand, the 2 seasons of Survivor UK, and the 2 seasons of Australian Survivor that aired before the Network 10 series. Now, if you want to hear me talk about the players from Australian Survivor and from Survivor South Africa more in depthly, go back and watch my Australian Survivor Top 10 Players of All Time and my Survivor South Africa Top 10 Players of All Time. Though I will still be talking about some of those players, as, to be honest, a good chunk of the main list still includes players from those seasons. 8 out of the 10 people on the list are players that I've already talked about in those previous videos, so I will be talking through some honorable mentions here, and through these honorable mentions I'll be talking about a lot of the players that didn't make the cut from the seasons that I haven't talked about. Starting off with Survivor UK, really only has one main consideration, and for me that is Richard, the 3rd place finisher on that season. And I think Richard is kind of just an underreported player in the history of Survivor as a whole. I mean, considering when the season aired, which was in 2001, Richard played a pretty savvy game here. I mean, he is the first person in the history of Survivor to attempt to take a goat to the end. I do think he made a fatal mistake in allowing Charlotte to get further into the game than what he should have. But outside of that, he was in the majority for most of the game. He knew when to turn on his majority to better his odds of getting to the end of the game, and especially getting it to the end of the game with Jackie, who he easily wins against. So for me, he was a good enough player to at least mention here. I did also want to kind of mention James from UK Season 1 because he was someone that really manipulated the tiebreaker rules, and if it wasn't for him manipulating the tiebreaker rules, Charlotte doesn't end up winning that season as she goes home at the final 6, because without James coming up the plan to put random votes on a whole bunch of the opposition, which allowed them to possibly survive a tiebreaker. So I think you got to give James some credit for that too, so I just wanted to mention him here. From UK Season 2, I'm pretty much just going to mention the entire final 3, and Johnny, Susanna, and John. Johnny is just such a great social player of Survivor that I think he at least needs to be mentioned here. The problem I have with Johnny, though, and the reason why he didn't make the list itself, is because I don't know how much of it is actually him playing. The sense that I get from his game is that he wasn't really playing the game. He was just being himself. And through being himself, he got to the end and won. But I think on any other season where he would need to maneuver a lot more, where he would need to play the game a lot more, I don't know how well he would do in a season like that. Susanna was someone that I actually really liked on that season. I think she showed a decent amount of game ability of knowing who to align with and what moves to make. The problem is that she was never winning that season. There's literally no one on the cast that she beats. And a lot of that has to do with her demeanor, with the way that she comes across to people. But again, I think she has a decent mind for the game. And then we got John, who I think is the best player of Season 2 of UK, where I think his biggest flaw is obviously not building a stronger relationship with Susanna to the point where she would have wanted to take him to the end. But he was definitely the mastermind, if you want to call it, of that season. Like, he was the one in charge of that majority alliance. He was making decisions for that majority alliance. He's the one that actively did things on that season. But again, the reason why he's not making the list for me is because I think he was a bit too loyal. He was willing to take Johnny to the end, who probably beats him. Again, it's a bit unclear because I just didn't feel like he made the cut. But again, he was definitely a really good player on that season. Now, I actually don't have any considerations from Season 1 of Australian Survivors, Australian Survivor 2002, because the only person that would even be in consideration made it onto the list. But from Celebrity Australian Survivor, I have a couple of people I wanted to mention here. I wanted to mention Imogen, and I wanted to mention David Oldfield. Imogen is kind of weird, whereas, like, I don't think she's the greatest player in the world. I think she's a very just average player, but she should have won that season. I mean, if the season had played out the way it was supposed to, where people didn't return into the game, Imogen gets to the end with Nicole, and Imogen more than likely wins a jury vote. Because Guy and Justin were able to re-enter the game at the final 3, and are able to get to the final 2 somehow, that obviously stops her from winning. Though I will say that I do think Imogen makes a massive mistake as well in her not keeping David Oldfield at that final 5 vote, as that definitely would have bettered her odds of getting to the end. But again, I consider David Oldfield as well. I think David is another pretty savvy player. I think he had a decent mind for the game, We saw him maneuvering a lot. I mean, the fact that he was able to survive for as long as he did after his alliance had got taken out was pretty impressive, though. Again, I think a massive flaw for him is, again, he wasn't able to convince Imogen and Nicole to save him at the final 5. The fact that they vote him out when it was completely against their best interests is a knock against David, so for that, he didn't make the list. We got Survivor New Zealand, so I did consider the final 2 of Season 1 in Tom and Avi. Tom wasn't as much in consideration, though I do think Tom, again, has a decent mind for the game. He was good at challenges. I just think he's missing something socially. But Avi was very close to making the list. I mean, Avi was literally number 11. Really, to be honest, he was number 10 until I thought about it like a little bit more and I knocked him out. But he was so close to making the list. And I actually really wanted him to make the list. And for me, Avi is essentially a better version of Johnny. I think Avi had more agency in the game. I think there were things that Avi actually did within the game. I think he was so good socially to the point where everyone wanted to take him to the end. He won in a near unanimous vote. I mean, like, he really is a fantastic player. The problem is that I think he's hung up too much on the honesty and loyalty aspect of Survivor. And then also, when he is deceivious, he won't admit that he's deceivious. I feel like on any given season, I could see him running into a situation similar to what Coach ran into in South Pacific, where people just don't respect him because he won't own up to his game. I do think he gets very lucky with what New Zealand Season 1 being the type of season that it was, where it wasn't a super strategic cast, and because of that, I think a lot of the people at the end really just respected him just because he was a nice guy. Like, I think if he was on Season 2 of New Zealand, I think he has a very tough road to win. So for me, he didn't make the cut. And then from New Zealand 2, I consider the 2 people who were friends before the show, and that's Dave and Matt. And I think both of them are very strong players. While Matt was in trouble post-swap, I mean, he pretty much ran majority of that post-merge section of the game and was in a very good position early on in the game as well, only for him to be blindsided with an idol in his pocket from one of his closest allies in a situation where his good friend from when he was a kid was also in the game. So it's like, I don't really blame him for being as secure as he was, though obviously I think the fact that he didn't read that something was happening is a knock against him, and he doesn't make the cut for me. And also Dave, I just have a tough time rating Dave, and a lot of that comes from him being much more greatly benefited by the fact that Matt was there than Dave was there. I mean, obviously Matt gets saved at that 1 vote post-swap, and because of that, he's able to make it to merge, but at the end of the day, that's only 1 vote. I feel like Dave was benefited at multiple votes from having Matt there. I don't really know how to properly rate Dave's game, because I can definitely see a debate for him being on this list, and to be honest, being decently high on this list. I just feel like him being in the game with Matt really adds just a lot more ambiguity on like how good of a game did he really play. Especially when like early on in the game he wasn't really getting his way, and it really wasn't until swap that he started to get closer to Aaron and started to make decisions, but even then I don't think he was making the correct decisions. So it's like, I just felt like his game was so tough to rank, and because of that I just didn't even put him on the list, though I can definitely see an argument for it. But now onto the list itself. We are at the top 10. So essentially 4 people from Australian Survivor, at least the new series, made the cut, and 4 people from Survivor South Africa ended up making the cut in my top 10 here. So places 5 and below on both of those lists did not make the cut. So again, if you want to see who those people are, go watch the other video. But it's those people plus 1 player from Survivor New Zealand and 1 player from an older Australian Survivor season that did end up making the cut. Let's get started with the list. So at number 10 from Australian Survivor, Champions versus Contenders, we have Sharn. And this was tough because I really debated over Sharn and Avi, because I think Avi winning is obviously a major boost for him, but also I think Avi's win was more impressive than if Sharn had won either of her seasons. However, the reason why I decided to put Sharn on the list over Avi is I feel like Sharn's a much more versatile player. I feel like unlike Avi, again, like, I don't see Avi ever willing to admit that he's playing the game strategically. Sharn does. I mean, Sharn does, again, I think she gets too caught up on honesty and loyalty as well, but I do think she at least admits that she does play the game. She's very versatile. I think even more so than Avi. She's very good at aligning with different types of people. She's able to align with the people that are stuck up on honesty and loyalty, but also is aligned with the snakes of the world. Like, she was aligned with like Nick and Harry and that sort of group as well. I think that's a very rare skill to have in something like Survivor, and Sharn has that. I think because of that, I don't see Sharn going home early on any season. I do think Sharn, though, has that fundamental flaw of not being able to read the jury correctly, and that led to her losing both of the games that she's played. But I do think Sharn is a very savvy player and also just a very versatile player. So for me, I felt like she barely squeaks by onto the list here at number 10. Now at number 9, also from Australian Survivor, we have Pia. To be honest, I considered moving Pia down, actually, after I thought about it a bit more, just because I do feel like Pia is the type of person that is going to be targeted early on in the game. And I feel like that happens almost every single season. Then when I thought about it more, I mean, she does lose control later on in the game at the final 7, and also with Luke saving her at the final 5. I really just debated over a lot of things of like, how great of a player is she really? But then there's also such positives in her game. She's very good socially. She is someone that I do have faith in knowing what her optimal move is. She is someone that won a jury vote unanimously. And all those things are things that I thought were enough to put her above Sharn still. Even though I do think Sharn is probably a more consistent player, I do think Pia quite possibly wins more than Sharn ever does. So while Pia's not perfect, for me, she still lands here at number 9. And number 8 here, we have already our third Australian Survivor player. Again, out of 4. But at number 8 here, I have Jericho, the winner of season 2. And Jericho is someone that the more I thought about it, the more I kind of went down on his game. I mean, to be honest, since I recorded my Australian Survivor Top 10 Player of All Time video, I have listened to David's RHEP interview, David Genat, winner of Australian Survivor All-Stars. And the way he talks about Jericho really made me think less of Jericho as a strategic player in the game. The fact that he was so adamant on playing his own game and not wanting to be connected with Luke for whatever reason. Like, it just really kind of turned me off to his game to the point where, again, despite him being such a great social player, and again, he has a strategic mind for the game, I do think some of that strategic thinking might be misplaced. And to be honest, I've always thought that. I mean, even on season 2, again, like the 3-2-2-2 vote is just ridiculous and doesn't end up benefiting his game at all. Him trying to save Mark, same thing. Like, why are you doing that? There's no point. But I thought his overall season 2 strategy of keeping around these sort of massive targets around him really worked. And it's so strange to me that he was so against that sort of idea on All-Stars. So Jericho, for me, overall, my estimations of him as a player has gone down, but I didn't really feel like it was enough to be lower than Pia, who, again, I just feel like Pia is a much more high variance player. So I still have Jericho here at number 8, but to be honest, my opinion of him as a player, again, has gone down. Now number 7. At number 7, we finally have a new player to talk about, and from Survivor New Zealand, the top player from Survivor New Zealand for me is Lisa Stanger, winner of Survivor New Zealand Thailand. And I really like Lisa. I liked her on her season. I do think she runs into a similar issue with Pia in the sense that I do think she could be in danger initially on her tribe, though it never seemed like she was really in danger on her actual season. It seemed like she was able to integrate herself socially pretty well initially, and is another player that, again, I just have every faith in her knowing what her optimal move is. I do think she knew when the right time to strike was. Again, she knew when to blindside Brad. She knew when to blindside Matt and like how to execute that. She knew who she should be aligning with and how long she should stick with them. Now, I do have issues with the final 4 round of that game where she largely gets saved just due to the fact that Tara wanted to throw away her game. If Tara didn't throw away her game there, I do think there's a pretty good chance that Lisa goes home there, and that's not particularly great. And then I also think on the jury at the final tribal council, I do think a large reason why she does get votes of like Aaron and Eve and some of these other players is because of Matt revealing his relationship with Dave, and if that didn't happen, I don't know how secure Lisa's win is. So those were kind of the hazy points for me to where like I didn't really feel comfortable putting much higher on the list than this. I think when looking at the 3 players we've already talked about, I think she's very clearly better than them. I do think she is a better version of Pia. I think she's able to execute her moves better than Pia, as shown with that, again, that 3-2-1 vote where Matt goes home is just completely ridiculous. I mean, the fact that she orchestrates a 3-2-1 vote just in general is good, but the fact that it was a 3-2-1 vote against a guy with an idol, a guy that was your closest ally, and a guy that had his best friend from childhood also in the game, and you convince that person to flip on him. Again, it's just a ridiculous amount of circumstances that I think you gotta find impressive. So for me, she ranks here at number 7. Now we're number 6. We're finally moving on to Survivor South Africa, which actually I didn't even realize this until now. Yeah, it's kind of funny how this list is structured, where 8, 9, and 10 are all Australian Survivor players, and we're about to get to 4, 5, and 6, which are all Survivor South Africa players. But whatever. At number 6 here, we have Graham. And I talked about Graham already. I think Graham is essentially a boring version of Tony from Survivor US. I think he's a very strategically savvy player, a very good social player to the point where everyone wants to align with him. I do think he gets a bit too paranoid at points. I think he plays a bit too hard at points, makes some crazy moves for the sake of making crazy moves. But his natural social ability is able to help him get through that and recover from that. He was able to get Shane, someone who is his biggest rival, to side with him and not even play either of his 2 idols at the final 7. That's fantastic. On the first vote of the season, he's able to flip the entire tribe against Xavion. That's great. And then later on, align with Xavion. I do think he barely squeaks out the win at the end. Is that final round is a very rocky road, and even when he gets the final tribal, there was a chance that Sivu wins that season. But overall, I mean, I still think Graham is a very strong player of Survivor. Again, very good, so good socially. And has a great strategic mind as well. But I think he can get a bit too move crazy, so for that, he lands here number 6. Now number 5, we have what I believe is the highest placed woman on the list. From Survivor South Africa, we have Ashley Hayden. She's a very strong player in every aspect of the game. Physically, she won 5 immunity challenges. Socially, she was aligned with almost everyone in her tribe. Strategically, she pulled off moves that were far above what other people on that season were thinking. And she's someone that really manipulates the tiebreaker rules, where again, at this point in Survivor South Africa, the tiebreaker was still previous votes. So she really manipulates the votes at previous tribals to get her targets out at future tribals through tied votes. And again, that's a very impressive move to make. Innovative gameplay from her, where she gets like Isaac out in a 2-2-2 vote, where he gets taken out because he had 1 previous vote at the previous tribal council. That was a throwaway vote that she told Gigi and Sade to make. Like again, it's an incredible move there. Do you think she mismanages the jury at points? And I think she takes the wrong person to the end, and that's really what ends up costing her the game. I've already talked about this a billion times, but I do think if she takes Proverb to the end, I think she wins 7-2. While obviously she takes Gigi to the end, she loses 6-3. I think she misread Gigi's ability to get jury votes, which is kind of asinine when you think about Gigi coming from a tribe that was almost half of the jury. So it's like, I don't know what Ashley Hayden was thinking at that final round, but outside of that, she plays an extremely dominant game and is definitely one of the best players in international Survivor history. She lands here at number 5. Now at number 4, we have the person that ranked number 2 on my Survivor South Africa ranking, and that is Werner. And again, I think Werner's a fantastic player. Again, another one that very good physically, socially, and strategically. Very good at finding idols. He's just an all-around great player. I do think he has a target on his back. Despite having that target on his back, he was able to manage it decently well, where even at the point where his majority started to turn against him, he was able to keep Tom on his side, where he's able to blindside Katinka. And I think that move of the final 5 where he uses the idol to save Jean to take out Katinka, I think that's a fantastic move on his part. Again, it doesn't work out for him. It still was a strong move in my eyes. I think he's a better player than what even his game really demonstrated. Because I mean, considering how crazy of a cast that season has, the fact that he was able to wrangle that cast together, be on his side for a good chunk of that game, I do think is impressive in its own right. So again, Werner lands here at number 4. Now at number 3, we have the final player that I have not talked about previously. For me, this player was a shoo-in to be on the list. I mean, a shoo-in to be very high on the list, and it just was more of a factor of where this person lands. So at number 3 here, I have Rob Dickson, the winner of Australian Survivor 2002, and I think Rob is not one of the most understated players in the history of Survivor. I think, especially considering the time that he played, this was 2002, I think he is easily the best player of Survivor up to that point in time. Like, it's not even close in my eyes. I think he is a better version of Tom Westman. Because I essentially think he plays a very similar game to Tom Westman, but he doesn't lose control in the end game like Tom Westman did. He was a very dominant force early on in the tribe, was a leader in his tribe, was the one that led them to win a lot of challenges. Then come into the merge, they had the numbers, they steamrolled for a bit. At the final 6, he's able to recognize that Joel is someone that he can keep in the game to be loyal to him, and through that, him, Shona, and Joel flip the game take out Jane. And yes, this does blindside Katie, who does become extremely bitter towards him. But outside of that, there really was no downside here. He really just is able to dominate the game from that point forward. Joel actually lives up to his promise to Rob, where Joel said that he's going to throw the final 3 immunity challenge, and he actually does. And we have Rob easily win against Sharn. And to be honest, Rob wins against anybody. I don't think there's a single person on this season that Rob loses against. I think he's just such a dominant force on this season. Again, he's a Tom Westman figure for this season, but without the minute flaws that I have with Tom Westman. But for me, Rob Dickson's one of the best winners in the history of Survivor, and the only reason he's not higher on this player ranking here is because he did play so long ago. It was 2002, it was before the introduction of idols and advantages and all that, and who knows how he really adapts to the modern game. But I think considering this amount of skill that he had in 2002, I have every amount of confidence that he is truly a great player. Though again, I think there's more proof that the next 2 players that we'll be talking about are able to adapt to the modern game more so than Rob. I still think that he's easily one of the best players to ever play the game Survivor, just as a whole. Now we're at number 2, and I mean, if you can't tell, that it's between the top player from Survivor South Africa and the top player from Australian Survivor. Because it wasn't really that close. So for number 2 here, I do have David, the winner of Australian Survivor All-Stars, and I think David's a great player. I mean, I think he's someone that, again, is very good at every aspect of the game. He's good physically, socially, strategically. I think he really learned from his mistakes from his first season and was able to completely dominate the second season, though it's not without his flaws. Again, there are points where he was left out in the vote. There are points where he got too overconfident and didn't really know what was going on. And those are obviously massive knocks against him. At the same time, though, I do think he has some very impressive elements of his game as well. I mean, him wanting to align with Matt Rogers and him pulling off the Daisy move, I think that was all very, very impressive. Him being able to get Tarzan and Moana to never really even consider flipping on him, I think is really impressive. Him to get Sharn to be loyal to his side for as long as she is pretty impressive. I think his idol play at the final 8 was a very impressive move as well, where he's able to better their odds in terms of a rock draw. I think overall, I just think David's a very savvy player. I think he knows what he's doing. I think that was definitely benefit for me from listening to his interview with RJP. To be honest, even more so than the number 1 player on the list. I think I was more impressed with David's interview where he talked through his game. And yes, he admits to his flaws, and I think there definitely are flaws within his game. But I was impressed by how much he's improved since his first time and how much he has seemed to learn as time's gone on. And I do have every confidence in him as a player on future seasons. So for me, David's here at number 2. Now number one player of International Survivor for me is obviously the one I ranked number 1 on Survivor South Africa, and that is Rob Bentele, the winner of Island of Secrets, and again, just an extremely dominant player. I think just like David, very good at all 3 aspects of the game, physically, socially, strategically. But I think unlike David, where even in David's winning season, in his winning season where he dominated, he had a bevy of flaws within that. I think Rob played one of the least flawed winning games in the history of Survivor. There are flaws. I do think that final 5 round is a very wonky round in terms of his game, but outside of that, I do think he is a very impressive player. But he's able to completely dominate his initial tribe, be a major figure within that with Nathan. He's able to get the idol from Paul. At the second swap from that point on, he pretty much dominates the rest of the game. I mean, he builds the core group that he ends up riding with until the very end of the game, and we literally see him pick off his threats one by one by one in the merge, and that alone is very impressive. But also, I just feel like he thought about the game in a very out-of-the-box sort of way. I mean, the way that he manipulated the Island of Secrets to really benefit his game by creating this fake advantage that made it so people couldn't blindside him, I think that was incredible. I just overall think he is a fantastic player of Survivor, one of the best players of Survivor we've ever seen across any version of the show, and he seems to be able to align with just so many varying types of people, while also, again, being a great physical and strategic player. So overall for me, Rob easily has the land here at number 1. So there we go. Those are my top 10 players for International Survivor of all time. Finally able to get this done. I guess next up would be Survivor US plus International. I guess just make it top 10 Survivor players in general of all time. That might be something in the future. Still want to do the International Survivor winner and season rankings, plus also eventually, again, the Global Survivor winner and season rankings, but again, that's for down the road. For now, that's the video. That's my top 10 players of International Survivor. Thank you for watching.